Hey David, how
Oh
are you
my
doing?
God. Hello, I'm so good. How are y'all?
Hanging in there, with the impending cold snap. I don't want to be caught like a fish out of water. I need to be prepared. And so I'm loaded up to the gills with firewood just in case, something happens. I can cook, throw it in the fireplace, but enough about me. How are you doing?
Good, but we really need to reel in these puns, Adrian.
Never.
And Happy New Year, of course.
And Happy
See,
New Year.
another two votes that you could still say Happy New Year.
Fine, fine. Just call it a gaffe on my part, okay? We'll move on.
So tell us, David, tell us where you work in AWS, and tell us at a high level, what did we announce with CloudFormation Hooks?
Yay, cool. So my name is David. I am an engineer on the CloudFormation team. I've been working in infrastructure as code for what seems to be 700 years. So it's very near and dear to my heart. So I was very excited to be able to work on CloudFormation to launch our revamp of the CloudFormation Hooks product, which makes it super easy for folks to run policy as code against their infrastructure as code. So lots of as code.
Yeah, and the folks that came to a non-traditional path of tech and even some of our new users, why would you want to run policy against infrastructure as code? Isn't the idea of infrastructure as code is you just kind of let it down and set it and forget it, it's immutable? Is there a specific reason why they'd want to do that?
There's so many reasons. There's lots of fun reasons. A lot of this comes from sort of our own experience developing. A lot of the lessons CloudFormation has learned is we use CloudFormation to deploy software in Amazon and AWS, right? So we learn a lot of lessons. There's a lot of reasons why you might, as an organization, want to forbid certain properties. You don't want this bucket to be public. You don't want these roles to have too many extra permissions. But there's also lots of practical reasons. Like I know I myself have accidentally set my DynamoDB capacity, like read or write capacity. I meant to say 100, and I've definitely put in 1,000, and that was really exciting getting to build the next time. So there's lots of reasons why an org might want to protect themselves with different policy as code, but it's also there to help developers from making like silly little mistakes that you probably didn't think that you're introducing.
Well, totally makes sense.
The infrastructure as code experience, I'm going to define certain resources like an EC2 instance or an S3 bucket, having nothing to do with the policies themselves. And the idea that you're describing with, let's say, policy as code is that you can define specific guardrails that say, in addition to what I thought I deployed, here's what I should be allowed to do as defined by my organization. And it sounds like prior to CloudFormation Hooks, you could still do this. What were some of the pain points that customers experienced last year prior to this launch?
Yeah, so a lot of folks, we have the saying internally that it's not great to rely on good intentions to do things. And sort of before we introduced like these policies code hooks into CloudFormation proper, we really customers are really relying on like developers to set up CI tooling around their infrastructure as code, or making sure that like code reviewers were able to like really dig in and see all the nuance of the like things that they are building. So there's a lot of like best practices that develop, but really no great way or place to enforce those best practices, and relied on people setting up all this infrastructure and all these pipelines to do things the right way. So we're hoping with CloudFormation Hook, we can sort of help make that easier for organizations to take these policies that have become best practices in their organization and in one place inject them and not have to rely on everyone setting up the perfect pipeline or this perfect CD or CI system.
Interesting. It kind of makes me wonder out loud, putting my thinking cap on, which admittedly I've had off for, I don't know, a better part of a month before the holidays anyway. So if I'm an operator or, a sysad, uh, what benefit do I have of using hooks compared to something that just like a basic detective control that says, hey, here's a problem?
Yeah, I mean, the detective controls are super great. Like they're, they catch things that happen outside of IaC. They're really important. But with detective controls, proactive controls, what we found is that like organizations tend to get like a little scared by the power that they give developers, right? And what that ends up looking like is like you get limited roles. You can only build certain things. You're only permitted to create certain predefined architectures. And this kind of sucks just because like developers like to move fast, like to experiment. Like I don't know if you are at reInvent, like I was at reInvent last year, like half as a presenter, half as an attendee. There's tons of cool new services that like I want to use, but without like certain guardrails built in to the system to stop bad things from happening, like as a platform, it might be a little nerve-wracking to give developers unfettered access to like all of the cool things in AWS land.
So if we go back to defining our terms here, we've talked about CloudFormation, foundational service that developers use to deploy infrastructure as code each and every day. We've defined hooks, but it sounds like what we're really going to be focusing on today are the target control points and all the different new features that have been announced. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we're about to see here in the demo at a high level?
For sure. So I'm going to take you through the day in the life of like me as an actual developer. And I'm going to show you sort of how to use hooks to make sure that like bad things don't happen when you're provisioning resources in CloudFormation. So this is sort of the traditional experience in CloudFormation, with hooks, is that a resource is being provisioned, and just before CloudFormation goes to call the API to actually provision the thing, your policy is evaluated against it, and it chooses to block it or reject it or permit it. I'll show you some other cool things too, but I'll save that for later.
That sounds fantastic. I really do like the way that you put it, and just to be able to visualize and contextualize that you do everything like normal, then right before you hit the big button, there's that last mile or that last effort to go through and make sure that, hey, anything that you pull out of the water is the right length. Anything that you're trying to figure out is exactly where it needs to be before something bad happens. I really like the way that you put that.
Yeah, and CloudFormation does that for you, right? And so instead of having to rely on your developers doing it before they submit their CloudFormation template to be deployed, CloudFormation does the text for you.
Yeah, the level of sanity that this is going to save, the level of comfort, and I really appreciate the way that you put it, and being afraid or reticent anyway to give developers more access than what they need. I work with partners on a daily basis, and that's the biggest push and pull that they have. You don't want to give them too much ability to go and potentially wipe an account out or deploy into another organization, but you also can't constantly be going back and forth and saying, hey, I need another level of access. I need to be able to do this. Hey, I need read and write access for this. It's never ending otherwise. So I would imagine that as we're going through the demo, we're going to see some pretty cool stuff that's going to be really analogous to Time Saver and have the ability to go through and really change the way that people experience doing these things.
Exactly. And it's so like, and everyone says this when they're about to do a demo, but it really is super simple. So let me actually just, I'm going to spin up a hook right now in my real account, and I'm going to show you what it's like to be protected by the CloudFormation gods via policy as code. Sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so I'm in the CloudFormation console now, and you can kind of see on the left, there's this new hook section. There's this really cool little graphic and articles sort of describing what hooks is, but we all did that. So I'm going to actually go in and set up our own hook right now.
Cool.
So in hooks, there's two different ways to create a hook. One is with a Lambda function. So we will just call a Lambda function whenever something happens, and you write the code that does the evaluation. It can do whatever you want. It can make network calls. It can roll a dice. It can see your stats on, like, if you've beaten Baldur's Gate 3. It can do whatever you want, which is super fun. I'm not going to show that today. I'm going to show you creating a hook using our policy as code DSL called CloudFormation Guard.
Okay.
So when you go to create your CloudFormation Guard hook, it has to run some guard rules. Full disclosure, I'm really good at writing Go and Kotlin and fun languages like that. I am not good at writing policy as code. And a lot of folks aren't. A lot of organizations aren't great at writing policy as code. But the good news is we don't really have to be. So on creating our guard hook, there's actually this GitHub repo I can just click on here with a bunch of predefined best practices for each AWS service. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so we can actually see. But if you look at Amazon S3, for example, there's all these rules which are super, they seem very reasonable, right? I don't know what object lock is, but we should probably enable it. Or there's no read access, public read access always feels like a good thing, right? We don't want your buckets being open. And there's rules like this written for all sorts of different services. So I'm I'm going to cheat a little bit for our demo today. I actually cloned this repo and selected a few of the rules, and I zipped them all together and uploaded them to an S3 bucket. So these are my guard rules. So I uploaded these to our a bucket in S3. This is my bucket from reInvent when I was playing around with hooks. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just point my guard hook that I'm creating to those rules that I have pulled from the GitHub repository.
Okay.
The cool thing with Guard is also if you've ever run it locally or if you've ever played with Guard, it gives you a really detailed output report of like what went wrong, what violated the rule, like exactly where. So when CloudFormation runs your Guard rules, we'll take that report and we'll upload it to S3 for you. In this case, I'm just going to select the same bucket where I pulled the rules from.
All right.
So David, we can inherit all of these best practices and guard rules, and it doesn't need to just be one set of rules for, say, S3 as you demoed. It could be across a number of different services, zip all of the guard rules up and into a single file, and then now you're taking a look at the entirety of your organization's, let's say, set of policies.
That's exactly right. Yep. And you'll see I wrote a template that I'll share with you in a minute that exercises many of these different rules that span many different AWS services. So I'm going to call this very cool OnAir hook because I think we can all agree that this is a very cool hook. And we can select where this hook is going to run. So I'm going to just choose resources right now, but we'll come back to this. So there's different places these hooks can run. And we can choose when during the resource provisioning lifecycle we'll run this hook as well. So I'm going to press create an update. So anytime we create or update a resource in our CloudFormation stack, this hook will run. Your hook can run in two different modes. It can run in warning mode, which is it will tell you that something failed, but continue provisioning. Or it can actually fail the CloudFormation operation completely and stop provisioning if your policy fails. I think for dramatic effect, we should choose fail. So let's see things truly fail. And I'm going to call this OnAir guard hook roll. Cool roll. It's important that everything we do is cool. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to skip this section, but you can narrow down exactly which resources or which stacks your hook runs for, but I'm going to have it run for everything. And I'm going to actually turn this hook on.
While that's running, David, we got a question from the chat from SBOT007. What type of hook would you want to run on a CloudFormation delete? So we talked about protecting you from a create. That makes sense. But what type of protections do you see from customers when they're saying the resources already exist, but I want to protect my environment from deleting resources?
Yeah, I think like a really good example is any stateful resource, right? So a DynamoDB table, your S3 bucket, your KMS key, things like that, things that you don't want deleted. And again, CloudFormation offers a lot of different ways to help you protect against things like that, like deletion policies and like retain policies. But things like this is, defense in depth, like stop things from being deleted. Or, hooks don't actually have to be purely like a yes, no gate. You can use it to send a notification saying that like a DynamoDB table was deleted or something like that. So you can be pretty flexible in when you choose to run deletes.
Very cool.
Cool. So I'm going to actually show you this hook in action. And to do that, I want to first show you a template that I have generated. Okay. So this is a really standard, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, a super standard CloudFormation template. It's just a Lambda function with a DynamoDB table and S3 bucket. I asked an LLM to generate this just before the show. And it looks really nice, right? Like it's, I know I'm kind of scrolling a little quickly, but like your S3 bucket has literally no properties, can't be better than that. DynamoDB table with a hash key, iconic. And it even has point in time recovery turned on. So this is grade A stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a stack right now using that template. From the web, next step, please work.
And we want to hear chat when David goes to run this CloudFormation template, just an S3 bucket, single line of declarative YAML. What do we think is going to happen?
Yeah, I'll just while the CloudFormation is running, I'll just take you back to this. And does anyone see anything wrong with this? Like, if I got a code review for this, I would say that this is excellent. The person should get promoted. Like simplicity at its best. But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on maybe over permissive
little bit
policies or
yeah, that's the first one that stuck out to me. I have a feeling this is going to go down like a lead weight. It's just going to go ahead and tank, but I would love to see what happens.
Oh boy, it looks like you're right, bud. So if I go through, I look at all the events in my CloudFormation stack. This is the normal CloudFormation provisioning like workflow that you're seeing. Sorry, it's a little squished. But as you can see, before all of these things were created, it started running my hook, right? It ran my guard hook, and then it failed. And Adrian, you're spot on. Apparently, a policy called IAM role administrator access policy rule has failed my template, which honestly makes a lot of sense. But also, my DynamoDB table failed provisioning. My S3 bucket failed for multiple different rules as well. Yeah,
that is handy.
It is, but this is annoying. I don't super love having to click these tiny little like things in the hooks invocations tab. But if you actually go to the S3 bucket that I mentioned earlier, there's this new folder that got created called Give and Guard Validate Report. And if you click on it, it shows you all the different detailed reports of exactly what was wrong.
And is there with each report per guard rule?
Sorry?
Is there one report generated on a per guard file basis?
Per file, yeah. So there's one report generated, per resource. So if I clicked into this and showed you the report, I won't do it because it's kind of like gnarly JSON, and it's zoomed in at 200%, so it'll look like a bunch of brackets. But you would see that it ran all of my guard rules against this S3 bucket. It skipped some of them because they weren't applicable, because an IAM policy rule doesn't make sense for an S3 bucket. But it did run all the S3 rules. So if I was a developer right now, what I would do is I would download each of these reports one by one, identify each of the issues, and try to fix it. And that's super fine, but I don't know how many folks on the stream today have debugged CloudFormation issues before, but one of my least favorite activities is what I call a spray and pray, basically just updating my template, sending it back to CloudFormation and hoping this time it passes validation. I think a better developer experience, something that I would prefer, is to sort of know before I try to apply these changes what would break. And to show you that, I'm actually going to go show you, we're going to go back to my cool hook that we created earlier, our very cool OnAir hook. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about hook targets. So this hook ran, it failed my S3 bucket from creating, my IAM role from creating, my DynamoDB table from creating, because it didn't meet the policies that I had set up when I created this rule. But the dev test cycle for that is very long. And really what I want is when I create a change set to know before I even execute it, if these rules would pass or fail. That way I can before I even try to make any changes in my infrastructure, no. So I'm going to turn this hook, I'm going to update this hook to target change sets as well.
And it is pretty fantastic to know that you can do this to make sure that when the dev launches, they're not just going to sit there and flounder.
Yeah, the faster I can iterate as a developer without having to sit around and wait for certain things to happen. The happier I am, and the faster I can actually make changes to fix the issues that are coming out. So this time, instead of just creating the stack with the submit button, I'm going to press create change set.
Okay. Cool.
And this change set is going to get try to be created, but this time the change set failed because my very cool OnAir hook failed. And if I go over here and click the status message, you can see like this time, this change set was not able to be executed. It's not executable because the following rules failed. My DynamoDB table encryption must be my DynamoDB table must be encrypted. My IAM role mustn't be administrator. I don't have bucket lock enabled, even though it should be because it's cool. I don't have S3 bucket read prohibited turned on. And all of these, like a detailed report of exactly what these mean, how to fix it, what line in my template this happened at, was output to that same S3 bucket that I showed you earlier, which is super cool. So
that is, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of sitting here and putting myself in the shoes of an operator and not wanting to go and chase my tail for quite some time. I just got hired to a company trying to make a splash. Going through and putting something like this into place to ensure that the quality of life of the developer is going to go ahead and increase. Mean time to resolution is going to decrease. Mean time to actual launch, how fast you can start turning around and onboarding customers. This is just kind of a bit of a net win in the way that you've not only presented it, but also shown how intuitive it is and how the individual can actually go through and start figuring out exactly what it is that they're tripping up on before they actually go and spend the time. They have to wait for the stack set to delete and go through and reconfigure. Sometimes it could take hours, and many large instances of a partner trying to deploy something like 4,800 accounts, that can be a day or two. So this is, I got to commend you. This is pretty fantastic.
Well, the thing that we were trying to think about when we were building this is we don't want developers or organizations to really have to change the way they do deployments. That's so hard. We did that at Amazon. It took years to get everyone onto continuous deployment, standardized tooling, and not everyone's going to be there, or maybe there's just going to be a bunch of tools, different tools that folks are experimenting with. By injecting hooks at change sets or the stack time, you don't have to change your CI or your CD. All those things just work the same. It just now will appear as a failure to developers if they don't if their change doesn't meet policy, which is super cool. So yeah,
there's a question in the chat from SBobcat007 again. How can you get that same check for new CloudFormation stacks? Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, totally. So what I didn't show, but I will now. So this actually was a change set for creating a stack, but you can tell your hook in the different targets. I'll click this bad boy. You can have you can select stack operations as well, and since we have create, anytime a stack is created or updated, these hooks will run.
That is pretty slick. As easy as clicking a button, setting a switch from the CLI. That's pretty cool. I know we might be bludgeoning cool to death a little bit, but this is actually pretty slick. I gotta say, y'all have outdone yourselves.
Oh, good. Well, not to. I should show you what life is like on the happy path, because I feel like most of us write perfect code all the time. So you should experience what it looks like when hooks works with perfect code. But I'll just show you briefly, from the output of that guard rule, I was able to take my template and, in response to all these different policies, fix it, right? So I changed my role to Lambda execution role, just super simple. I added object lock, public access blocking, point in time recovery, stable encryption. I added all those things. And now I'll show you just one last time me creating a change set for a stack with a compliant template, and you can see how cool things are.
Yeah, please, because otherwise I think we might be in a little trouble if we didn't go through and do that. I have a problem. I'm sorry.
That's fair. This is mostly for me, so people know that I actually do know how to write CloudFormation that is compliant with best practices. So
yeah, otherwise you'd just be catfishing us. But I digress.
OMG, these little fishies. Sorry, I am a sucker for a good pun. So
You're in the right place, I think.
Cool.
In progress. And just like that, CloudFormation Hooks ran swimmingly.
10 out of 10, no notes.
Amazing. Cool.
Well,
Well, yeah,
awesome.
so this is it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, David. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the chat and our viewers as a bit of a call to action, how they can go about get started and learn some more?
Yeah, totally. So just go to your CloudFormation console, hit the Hooks section, Hooks overview. We spent a lot of time writing documentation on how to write guard hooks, how to write Lambda hooks to do cool stuff. So go read it. It was written by humans for humans. So have fun. Happy deploying. Be safe.
Thank you so much for joining us, David. Always a pleasure. Don't be shy. Come back. I'm sure we'll be able to continue to celebrate our more wins together as we go.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.